Prelude and Fugue, number 2 in C minor. With this one, for the Prelude, it is a very busy piece, and it can be a piece that a student could easily become tense in. And also it just sounds very busy, and they lose sight of how it's the point of the piece, which is to this drive of propelling forward, this Fortspannung forward movement. You want to help them to be able to get that sound. I would work with my students on a very light Baroque detached touch, and talk to them about how it's going to sound legato and connected just by how fast it's moving. So you can actually play quite detached, and it will still sound legato. So I would talk to them about that, how that feels, how that looks. And we do that in a variety of ways depending on how they learn. If they're kinesthetic, I can, show them over their hands or over my hands. If they're visual, being able to show them with my hands first, and then having them try to mimic that. Or if they're auditory, simply playing it. The difference between playing without that touch versus with that touch, and seeing if they can find the difference between that and how they can get that sound. Next with this piece, I would look for opportunities to add dynamics, to add interest to the piece. I'd play the piece for the student and have them decide with me, where do you think it needs to get softer or louder? How can we add interest to this piece so it's doesn't just feel notey, but there's actually shape to it? Around measure 16, exploring the idea of getting softer, maybe adding the soft pedal. See how here I would explain to my students, see how it naturally wants to crescendo. We're building in that tension. Which makes sense, because then you get to this measure 25 where it becomes this very virtuosic, almost like a violin kind of or cello solo here. And maybe this would be the violin solo. So it makes sense that we're having this big crescendo there. So having the difference, knowing how soft to start, so you can actually build to that, and having sections where you change that dynamic setting. With this presto section, of course, I would start my student off going slow and then building it. And with this piece in general, hands separate, I would definitely recommend that to my student. Doing this section just with the right hand, getting comfortable with that before you actually move in to adding the left hand, and knowing the left hand confident as well. So you can play that and you can hear the different voices and how the dialogue together there. Oops, sorry. I'd explain to them this little gesture here is very improvisatory. So you want to make it feel like you don't have to necessarily be totally rhythmically strict, but you can make it kind of this improvisatory feel. And giving those little character spots to the presto and the adagio section is going to help the piece have contrast to it. All right, next we're going to talk about the fugue. With the fugue, again, I would really stress to my student about slow practice and how that's going to help us to get there faster. So with the first week with the fugue, I would really focus on doing the voices separately. First, I would play the fugue for my student. I'd remind them, again, if this is the first time I'm teaching them a fugue, I would introduce this idea of the fugue has voices, and they're going to be coming in. These subjects are going to be coming in different times. See if you can name what the subject is. So I would start at the beginning and ask them to look for a theme that continues to pop up. So I would play them the fugue and have them, listen for that theme. Hopefully they can, after hearing it from beginning to end, they can name that theme. Oh, okay, so this is what's coming. So that's my subject. So our next step would be, trying to find where those answers are, where the other thing comes in, where those other theme entrances, like at measure 7 with the tenor line. So we have that subject coming in there. We also have it again in the alto line at measure 15. And isn't this interesting how it's actually, this is shared between the hands now. So it's not just one hand playing the subject, but it's two hands here, which makes it very tricky. It starts out with the left hand, but then the right hand takes it. And how as pianists do we do that? How can we emphasize that line still, make it sound like it's being played by one hand, but it's actually being shared by two? The challenge of that is, and trying to do something like that, to practice something like that, I would definitely recommend them to play just that, the subject by itself. Between the two hands as appropriate. And then I'd have them add all the hands together while still, training their ear to hear that voice. So you still want to hear that the other voices are just around it, counter subjects around it that are supporting it, but it's not the subject that we want to hear. I also talk about the sequences or episodes in the music that come up, like in measure 5. What those look like, how they help us travel. They help us travel somewhere else in the piece. I'd also talk about the different strettos that are in the piece, like at measure 7. I would go to the subject in the median key at measure 11. Episodes, right? Sequences. Overall, I would just make sure they know, let's organize it again, like we have to our other Bach pieces, into those sections, and take it little at a time, and remember the importance is being able to separate those voices, being able to play them, separately from each other. And even taking ideas like at measure 4 or measure 8, and being able to do those with different hands. And hearing how the dialogue between those voices is very helpful. But mostly I just tell my students, slower is a better practice. Be very slow and deliberate. Take small chunks at a time, and you'll get it. The fugues, I think, look overwhelming at first, but if you can do a little bit of time, it makes it doable for the student.